So hello, welcome back to the channel and welcome to this renovation venue. We're back doing some Assetton Corsa Competizione, but today I've got my trusty controller. Now I thought I'd take the time whilst I'm not at my sim rig to do this video and put together what I think the game is all about when it comes to using the controller. It is a game, it's on console. There's going to be hundreds, thousands of people out there, probably millions of people, whether you're on Xbox or PlayStation, the Series X, Series S, the PS5, that are looking to pick up Assetton Corsa Competizione, and whether it's worth picking up to play it with a controller. Now, if you've come to my channel before, you'll know full well that I've got all Fanatec equipment and I've been using the game for the past year or since its release, and I've got to be honest, it's the best game that's ever come to console as far as a sim racer is concerned. It's got everything that I've always wanted when it comes to a driving game. It's not all about these gimmicky buy your attachments and your turbos and your downforce and your different suspension that Forza's always been on about, which is all that we sort of got lumbered with really for the past God knows how many years with console gaming. Then we had Project Cars 2, which sort of brought a real light into the emphasis of driving, although setups are always going to be a huge part of sim racing. And it always comes down to who's running that best setup that suits the driver as to who's going to be quickest on the day, really. But obviously you've got to put all that skill together, you've still got to drive the car, so it's not all about just the setup. But obviously equipment wise, I've got to be honest, if you're using a wheel, whether it's a Thrustmaster or a Logitech wheel or a Fanatec wheel, or I don't even know if some of the PC sort of based wheels will still work on the Series X. I've got no idea, but we're running at 60 frames on the Series X and it does look really nice and smooth. But yeah, coming back to equipment, using a controller over these past few days to try and run a few games, try and sort of tweak my setup, and I'll go into all that shortly. It certainly isn't anywhere near the sort of lap times I'm capable of setting. I'm thinking about 3 seconds a lap off my own personal sort of lap times, and that's being generous really. To be consistent at those 3 laps, I think of asking a heck of a lot. You can see here I'm running ragged really, but the main thing about having a wheel in sim racing to me is, one, being able to brake effectively using all the braking ability of the car. The huge issue I find in I'll just really run this, or we'll come back to the main menu, but the main thing that I find the problem with Assetton Corsa Competizione when you're using a control pad is not being able to brake effectively. There just seems to be so much more feedback comes through the car. You can see there that I managed to set a 141.8 in the BMW, which is a personal best. Whether that's in a race, I really can't remember. But I'm sure this same car and setup features in one of my other YouTube videos. And the setup is available on the SetSpace website, or you could just get it from the YouTube channel. It was completely up to you really. But I use the same setup and I have tweaked it a tiny bit for use with the controller, but I'll run over that shortly. There are a few issues, don't get me wrong, with this game on Series X. Whether it's still the same issue on the normal Xbox, I've no idea, because I haven't ran the console or the control pad on the standard Xbox since purchasing the Series X. So let's just have a look at some of the issues that you've come across. So I've literally just ran my own race here, and I'm going to come into the game mode and I'm going to go back and let's just say I want to do a little bit of hot lapping. I'll run over the setup just shortly, but as the game launches, and it is super fast on the Series X, don't get me wrong, we'll go into the setup and I'll just double check the control settings that I'm using, and I'll run over these shortly. They're still loaded in. Brilliant. So let's go to drive the car. So you notice here that I'm literally I'll just unattach my controller for a second. Just wait for it to reattach. So if you just look here, that I'm just tapping the controller left. I'll just accelerate. And it's sort of still holding left, which is really not what you want. This is just so hard to control. This isn't the setting that I'm wanting. But the issue that you get is that when you've loaded the game and say you're going to go into hot lap and you're going to do hot lap session, and you use the setup that you've used, the controller setup, when you've finished in that hot lap session, let's say you go and you think I'll join a race or I'll join a multiplayer race, this controller setting is no longer applicable to the setting that you're using. It just uses something completely different, and you have to relaunch the whole game and then start a new session for this controller setting to actually take effect. I don't know what's going on with it, but it just seems to stay in this weird sort of, once you've clicked sort of left, it stays going left, and it's almost like it's a sticky controller, but it's not at all. So I'll just quit out of this and I'll start a brand new session. So I'm literally just going to quit the game here. So if I go to the main Xbox menu, you probably can't see what I'm doing because it doesn't film this. I've literally quit the game. So right now my capture card has stopped working because it doesn't record when you're in the main menu, and I've literally just pressed to start to launch the game again. Now I've got to be honest, this game launches really quickly. You can see I've just started the recording again now, but within 50 seconds of starting the game, going through all the title warm-up as quickly as you can, and then flicking through to start a game, you can be playing in 50 seconds. So just quickly blasting through here, we go to the single player, we're going to choose the hot lap, press start, and you're racing again. It is so quick, I've got to be honest. It is night and day that compared to the standard Xbox. So I'll load in my settings. I'll share these settings with you that I'm using, and then I'll go over my controller settings. But you'll just see if I come into the controller settings, because it won't have loaded them, it defaults to the standard setup controller settings. So I'll just go to one of the presets that I've done. You can see that there. But then you'll see when we're doing this again now, and I am using a manual gearbox. So you notice now that it's centering. So before, when I was clicking left, it would just constantly sort of drag off left like this, like you were still steering. But it is literally a flick and it returns back to the center. So let's just go through some of the issues with using a controller on the Series X. Like I said, I don't know if this is an issue on the standard Xbox. So when you go into, let's say for example, we're going to add some speed sensitivity. So I click on that, and let's say I'm just going to add 30%. I click apply, and then we exit. We go back to the game and we carry on driving. We expect that to have made a change. But if you come back to the main menu, go back into the controls, you can see that that adjustment that we've made, it does not register at all. It's gone back to the same settings as you were using before. So in order to add this change that you've made, say we want to add that 30% again, you need to come down to setup, go into create a setup. Let's just say we're going to call it set 1. I'll quickly type that, and then we save it. So once that's saved, you then need to go to load setup and load it, then come back, and then you can carry on driving. Whether that's made a change, you can go back and look, and you can see there that it's saved the setup. So in order to make a change within this menu, you need to save it as a preset and then go back into the game. Don't just make changes on here and then just go apply and then back into the game, drive, because when you come back to the control menu, it doesn't save it. One other thing that I don't particularly like is you cannot change. All you've got is forward and normal and reversed. I mean, I do like to use the right analog stick to use throttle and brake. That is more natural for me, but to use the bumpers isn't particularly natural, and I've got a bit of an issue, to be honest, on this new control pad, that this accelerator one does stick a little bit once I start using it, but after maybe 20-30 minutes of gaming it starts to unstick itself. But maybe a little bit of more gaming and it'll start unsticking. But yeah, that's one of the issues that I've got within the steering. But let's just look over the settings that I'm using. So I'm going to load up the settings I've got. I've got no vibration, which I've seen a lot of people don't use. It does probably ruin the controller using the vibration. It's just constantly there and it's just a niggle. Obviously the dead zone settings, if you've got a dead zone on your controller, it's probably knackered, to be honest, because there isn't particularly much of a dead zone on these controllers. But if you're steering left and you've got the stick is sort of sticking and it's continuing to steer left, it could be an issue with your dead zones. The steering sensitivity is how quickly you're going to steer the car. And in general, I think using a controller, you want this all the way down at 0. Moving to the speed steer filter, this determines how quickly, if I flick left, it's how quickly the wheel returns back to center once I've done that. And obviously once I've done that, it's literally instantly back to center. In the real world, no one turns a car like this. Let's go with the wheel and it returns back to center. It's just going to stay like that, or it's gradually just going to come like that. It's not going to go like instantly. So this feature is a bit weird, but in all fairness, I want it to sort of be smooth back to the center. So the slower it returns back to center for me, within 100% and 0%, I don't really see any difference within the game, to be honest. I've got to be honest, I don't see any difference. It's as fast as that, and that's how quickly it works, to be honest. The steer speed, again, I think if you instantly go like that, that's how fast it steers. So I've tried to get that as low as I can. Hopefully it's sort of steering like this, but in all honesty, you're using a controller. It doesn't, unless you soft steer using a really smooth thumb movement, it literally just chucks the car in. There's no like tiny sort of increments when it comes to steering into a corner. The gamma, again, I don't see a massive difference. This ranges from 1 through to 4, and I've got to be honest, I've gone through them all, 4 down to 1. 1 suits me best. Can I 100% say I can feel the difference between 1 and 4? It's very, very minute, to be honest. Steering assist is 100% you want steering assist on. If you disable steering assist, let's say for example you're doing 140 miles an hour and you go to turn the wheel at 140 miles an hour, it will have very little impact on, I wouldn't say a very little impact, but it won't turn the wheel like 180 degree rotation. You just wouldn't get through that arc. It would just scrub the wheels. You would find it very hard to put that much amount of steering lock through the wheel in real life at that sort of speed. So turning the steer assist on enables you to not make that sort of steering angle. It gives you a relative steering angle to full whack left on the steering wheel or full whack right. If you turn this off and you're doing 180 miles an hour or 160 whatever, and you decide to turn left full whack, it will literally turn left full whack and you're literally in the wall. It's definitely one of those things that's kind of misinterpreted within the game. So steering assist, I would definitely enable steering assist. It feels like you're using something for us hardcore sim racers that you shouldn't be using, but you definitely need it if you're using a controller. What else is there? Audio, I've said this time and time again, but because I'm using the exterior camera and I sort of hang my head in shame as a sim racer, using the external camera is just like, Jay, it's just wrong. You would slap yourself in your face. I would always sit in the car. If I'm sat at my sim rig, I am in the car. My steering wheel's sat there and I'm trying to recreate as much realism as possible. But when you're playing with a controller, this is a case of, yeah, I'm chilled out, I'm doing a bit of gaming. And I've got to be honest, the best camera angle is a third person camera angle. Whether it's the close view that I'm using or a kind of sort of chase view where you're slightly higher up, which does have its bonuses. You can see further down the circuit, but you can also see if a car is right in front of you. When you're in this sort of view that I'm in now, it's very hard to see if he's braking or when he's braking. And I did end up running into the back of someone during the multiplayer last night, which I did apologise for. But I couldn't actually see that he'd started to brake. But if I was in the higher up view, I'd have seen the brake lights come on. He was braking just a tiny bit early for me, which I didn't understand why. But the sound that comes through my headset, the chassis is just a little bit too loud on 100%, and I seem to find that definitely the tyres, you want to know what the tyres are doing. Exterior engine, you want to know what that's doing. Obviously I'm not riding in on board. The damage, especially when you're bouncing over curbs or hitting anything, sometimes I think 100% is just a little bit too loud. I want to hear less of what other people are doing and more of what my own engine's doing, especially with the gearbox. Weather and wind and stuff like that I'm not too bothered about, and the ambient sort of sound is like crowds and the tannoy system that comes over. Everything else I want to be able to hear 100%. In the assist menu, I'm using a manual gearbox, and I'd 100% suggest if you're new to sim racing or if you're new to gaming in the driving sort of world, definitely use an automatic gearbox. It'll give you an understanding of where you're coming down through the gears, and when you're using a controller, for me initially, I thought the automatic gearbox was really useful to get a feel for what the car's doing before I introduced the gears. Obviously I know where I'm changing down gear, and I've got to be honest, it must reduce my lap times by about half a second to maybe even a full second, choosing the gear that I want to carry through a corner. I often found that on the approach to some corners, I would be changing up to 5th gear when I really want to just stay into 4th gear throughout the whole corner, and then I've got a mid-corner gear shift that I didn't really need to make. I also find that coming down through the gears, it might hold 2nd gear on the apex, which just doesn't slow me down enough. I really would like to come down to 1st gear. Sometimes it is worthwhile carrying 2nd or 3rd gear through some of the corners on Kyalami, but I just found using an automatic gearbox, it just seemed to reduce my lap times. Definitely as soon as I changed to manual, I found an extra half second to maybe even a second. The other thing that you're going to want to use is the stability control. Turn it off altogether. It's going to just hinder your lap time altogether. A lot of lobbies will also, or leagues, if you're racing in certain leagues, obviously if you've got an out and out amateur league, you might find that the stability control is left on. And when you're using the control pad, let's say for example you're using the left stick and you're turning left, when you're approaching a left turn and you're carrying too much speed, the car will automatically brake, it will automatically steer you right, even though that you are continuing to steer left. When you sit in car, the wheel will still be turning, it'll be adjusting all these fine increments so that you don't understeer, you don't oversteer, and it's almost like it's driving for you really. It's reducing the amount of throttle that comes through the rear wheels. It's literally doing everything for you really, but also it's hindering your lap time. If you're getting better and better and you're figuring out where you should be braking, which is very different to something that's like Forza or Project Cars 2. This is a real simulator, so if you're thinking it's going to be an easy game to master using a controller, I think you need to open your eyes a little bit to where this game is pitched, and it's definitely pitched to people using a wheel. But can you still play this game using a controller? 100%. I had a very close race last night with a number of guys in a multiplayer lobby. I've only ran it on Kyalami so far, just trying to get the car set up, but it does run really well. I'll just run a little lap here, but obviously using the controller, so that you can see, just making a few steering adjustments. And I just find that you need to be braking in a straight line, so much more so than in using a wheel. You can see there just running a little bit wide. That's really one of the toughest corners using the controller. Same with this one, because you just want to just add a little bit of brake. You don't really want to come down to 3rd gear for this corner. Try and get all my braking done in a straight line, just a tiny bit more brake needed. And again, this is just a lift off, dab a brake, just rolling, and then back on the power, picking up this outside curb, braking at this marshal post. And there's a lot of coasting, I think. And also using a lot more traction control. You can see I'm using TC7. But I was surprised just how easy it was to pick this up and use it with a controller. I thought it would be unplayable almost with a controller. But you can see there just a tiny dab of brake on the turning, and it really is out of control. But as you can see, totally playable with a controller. And the sort of lap times that I was able to set using the controller itself, 143.6 was my best lap time that I was able to set. But mid 144s, but in real life, using a wheel, or not in real life in the sim world, but using a wheel, I'm setting like a 140, 141, and that's, I think the issue is being consistent. And the tough thing that I found using a controller was being consistent. Lap after lap, I can hit my deltas usually within about 0.3 of a second, give or take. And you've got to remember, it's not Forza. It's not Forza Horizon. This is a real sim, and to think that you can drive it using a controller, unless you're very dexterous with a controller, kids these days, they might very well be, but the fidelity that you've got using a wheel within a game like this, especially when it's going to be fully optimized for Series X, I think this is really aimed at using a wheel. But I'm not saying you cannot play this game without a controller, and it is totally playable with a controller. It has surprised me. But some of the things, let's just look over the controls that I'm using. And like I said, if you move into this to go and play a game online, just relaunch the game, and then your settings will work. If you're using the settings that I've given you and you've launched the game, you've been playing a little bit already, and then you decide to use my settings, they're just not going to work. On the Series X, I don't know if this is the problem on a standard Xbox, but it does not carry over the control settings from one race type to another race type. But for me, the filter needs to be on 100%, nice and smooth back to center, although it doesn't really make it that much smoother. Vibrations off, dead zones I haven't got any on my controller. Speed sensitivity, I want it as smooth as I can, and really when I'm sort of cornering, I'm just really gently using the controller. I'm trying to do all my braking as much as I can in a straight line without using any steering inputs at all. I find that when you brake and steer using a controller, it just creates the car. It puts the car into a bit of a slide, which is just not what you're wanting at all. And these are the things that you can really hone using a wheel and a pedal set. You can just really feel that car. The other issues that I find with the setup, when you go into the setups menu, return back to garage, setups are a huge thing, I think, when it comes to driving a car with a wheel. I don't particularly think the setups in this game are 100% for every car. But definitely the traction control I think needs to be used a little bit more. I generally go between 7 and 5 with the BMW. And the other main thing is using the steering ratio. I've set this to maximum. I just find it keeps the car less twitchy. I think usually I would have it on about 15 if I'm using the wheel. But with a control pad, I'm using 17. So I run through the full setup. Obviously tyre pressure is depending on what the track temperature is going to be. From a previous setup, I've got it set on 2 at the front, toe and cambers are maxed out. Caster's something that you're not going to feel on a controller, but if you're using a wheel, this generally makes the wheel feel a lot heavier. Electronics, as I've mentioned, traction control is a bit higher than usual, and brake brake calipers 1, the steering ratio at the rear, or not at the rear, at the front of the car, you wouldn't have it at the rear, but steering ratio set to 17. The lower this gets, the quicker the steering's going to be, so you definitely don't want this in when you're using the control pad. Brake balance, I probably usually have this, I think, around 58 something, but I found you needed less front brake balance when you're using the controller, because you're trying to rotate the car a little bit more and you're not really feeling how the car handles, you're just seeing how it handles in the game. It's a very different way of tuning, I think. Dampers, I've just got these set very similar to what I used in the previous setup. A few minor adjustments just because of the changes that I made to the wheel rates within this setup. And I think I've just raised the ride height a tiny bit because coming from the outside view I could actually see the car was bottoming out quite a lot in some areas, as well as hearing it. But yeah, it's been an interesting one to use a control pad, which is predominantly what a lot of people are going to be using when the game fully becomes optimized for Series X. I'm not sure all the changes that are coming. Obviously I think there's a few new maps, a few new cars. I think there's 7 new cars coming in February when the game launches. But yeah, still very much enjoying this title, even though I'm not using my wheel at the minute. Obviously I've still got that shoulder injury, but just enjoying the frames per second is a real boost from 30 to 60. Just allows you to be a little bit more precise with your inputs. As much as I'm using the controller, I'd hate to try this using a controller on the standard Xbox that I've got at home, but using it here, I probably can be a little bit more accurate using the Series X with the frame rate a little bit better. But yeah, hopefully you found this useful. I've probably got another video coming with the flight simulator stuff, but it's night and day between the load times between the flight simulator and this. Even the flight sim does take quite a long time to load, but this is pretty rapid. But yeah, thanks for watching the video. I hope you guys find it useful that are using a controller. If you do have issues with the control settings, just remember, relaunch the game. It doesn't carry over between one game to the next if you're changing the game type. So if you're going from hot lap to multiplayer, or from multiplayer to hot lap, or from hot lap to practice session, just reload the game first and your control settings will work once you've installed them. But yeah, that's all we've got time for in this video. I hope you found it useful, and please do keep coming back to the channel for more and more content, whether it's sim race related or flight sim related. Ciao for now. So before we fully finish this game, I thought I would just take a few minutes just to have a look at this recent game that I've been playing on Series X. There aren't many games that have really caught my eye, but this one really is. It's just a stunning game. Visually, it's just beautiful, and some of the puzzle solving is really quite unique. Even the aspects of the game, the whole fighting part of the game, it can be quite basic and a little bit just sort of repetitive finger crunching, as you might call it, but it's still fully rewarding when you pull off some of these fantastic moves. Just the whole animation of the characters is just really good. But yeah, it is a very dark game. Obviously cut into some of the scenes that are more, I'd say, daylight based. They are really pretty, but a lot of the game's in very much darkened areas, which are sometimes quite eerie at times. But there is a huge story behind the whole game itself, and just the way that the game's sort of geared towards a lot of these sort of psychotic sort of characters that are in your head all the time. and just where the game's heading. I'm really interested in just playing it at the moment. Thoroughly enjoying this game, and looking forward to what it's got to hold. But yeah, I just thought I would share that for the players looking for the things to play on the console. Yeah, enjoy. Ciao for now.